Hare Krishna. So today we're doing the 10th part of our Bhagavad Gita Bhakti Shastri course, and we're going to finish up chapter 5. That's going to be verses 4 through 29. That'll complete the chapter. We only just began the first 3 verses last week. We planned to get a little bit farther, but circumstances didn't allow it. So today we're going to finish out the chapter. This chapter is focused on this Nishkama Karma Yoga without material desire, that's carried out on a very high level. It relates particularly to the very last section of chapter 2, when very advanced practitioners are described. And it begins with Arjuna having another doubt, though, about participating in the battle. And that we covered a little bit last week, where Krishna was saying that you should renounce all activities, and at the same time he said you should stand up, and in yoga you should fight. And so Arjuna was thinking that these two things, not having material activities while fighting in yoga, seemed to be mutually contradictory and separate paths. So he asked Krishna, "What's better? You're confusing me. What's the better path?" And Krishna told him that the karma yoga was a better path. And here in the chapter, in the text 4, he's going to 4 through 6, he's going to explain that a little bit more in detail. And so in verse 4, Krishna says, "Only the ignorant speak of devotional service, karma yoga," in brackets. So Prabhupada, in these verses here, he's going to translate almost everything as devotional service, because he's taking a particularly bhakti-centered view on these things. But here, in this particular one, he puts in brackets the actual Sanskrit term karma yoga, and as being different from the analytical study of the material world, or Sankhya. Those who are actually learned say that he who applies himself well to one of these paths achieves the results of both. So he's saying, you were asking about that, which one is better, but he said actually we shouldn't see them separately from each other. And then in text 5 he says, "One who knows that the position reached by means of analytical study can also be attained by devotional service, and who therefore sees analytical study and devotional service to be on the same level, sees things as they are." So again, usually when Prabhupada is talking devotional service, bhakti in the text is not being addressed very directly at this point, so you won't see the word bhakti in there. But Prabhupada is taking things, when it says yoga or yukta or yoga yukta, when it says karma yoga, various things, he brings that out as devotional service, because that's why he understands that the purpose of Bhagavad Gita is devotional service, and you can look back at these verses in a devotional way, from a devotional standpoint. And that's what he's doing in his purports, and so also in the translation. But in the actual text, they're talking about the yoga or yoga yukta or karma yoga. They have a meaning in the context of the bhakti, of the yoga ladder that we've been talking about, where Krishna is leading people up to the level of bhakti. It says, "One who knows that the position reached by means of analytical study can also be attained by devotional service, and who therefore sees analytical study and devotional service to be on the same level, sees things as they are." And 5.6 is, "Merely renouncing all activities, yet not engaging in the devotional service of the Lord, cannot make one happy. But a thoughtful person engaged in devotional service can achieve the supreme without delay." Okay? So let's take a look at, quite a few different terms are used here in these verses. And so, first of all, so Arjuna's question is based on the misunderstanding that karma yoga and Sankhya, or jnana yoga, have differing goals. Other commentators say that what Krishna's talking about here with Sankhya is jnana yoga, or the yoga of knowledge. But what we've seen throughout the work, this whole yoga ladder has gone step by step. It started out in the second chapter with Sankhya Yoga. And Krishna named it as such. And that's where he very elaborately described the difference between things that are temporary and things that are eternal, with the focus on the eternal spirit soul that we all are. And he called that Sankhya. Saying, here we have all the material things, and everything around us that's not the soul. These things are temporary. They're asat. And but yet there's one thing that is eternal, and that's ourselves, the soul. And he described, all the various consequences of that, what it means to be a eternal soul, and that was Sankhya. And but he understood that simply by a kind of a theoretical exposition like that one isn't going to be able to really practically understand it. It just becomes it's very theoretical. So then he introduced to Arjuna in the second part of the second chapter, he says, now I'm going to talk to you about, and he called it then Buddhi Yoga, but it's which really meant the Karma Yoga. Or then he says, you take that understanding of Sankhya, that I'm not this physical or mental self that I think I am. I'm eternal and don't have any real deep connection with any of this temporary stuff. Therefore, if I'm going to act in this world, I shouldn't have an objective that's part of this temporary world. We have the capacity to transcend, to become liberated. Krishna introduces this right away in chapter 2, even on text 215, that there's a chance for this deathlessness, he calls it there, amrita, that there's a possibility then for this a transcendence. And so that's what you should be aiming for. He says, go beyond the three modes of material nature. Even the Vedas talk so much about how to gain something, some status within this world. He said, that's not what you want to do. And if you understand that you are something completely different, you're a different type of thing, and that than everything around you, then your connections to that we want to minimize that, and we want to put something eternal as your goal. So you bring that understanding, that theoretical understanding of the soul, into your activities. And so he said, so instead of performing your dharma, because he first of all he told Arjuna that he had to perform his duty, his religious duty. That if he didn't do that he would acquire all kinds of sinful reactions, and also his status in the world wouldn't be so nice. He said you'll be sinful reactions, and you'll be infamous because of neglecting your duty. Whereas if you do your duty, then you will be famous, and you'll either have a kingdom if you win the battle, or you will go to the heavenly planets, Swargaloka. So either thing will be good for you. But either of those things, getting a kingdom or going to Swargaloka, of course, are still material things. So he said, you do your duty, but you do it without any kind of material desire. And that's what you do. Why? Because he gave some different reasons, but particularly because these results don't have any meaning for you. You're a soul, and you're trying, instead of trying to acquire something on this plane, you're trying to get out of this plane. So do it without any kind of material selfish motivation. And what happens with that is that it leads to the actual realization and experience of being a soul. It's much easier for us to understand things in theory, but to experience ourselves as souls is quite different. So it says you have to act in this particular way in order for that to begin to develop. And then at the end of chapter 2, it talked about when that jnana or knowledge starts to develop. Mm-hmm. And then he talks about jnana yoga. And so it's that level when it becomes very profound, when you really begin to experience yourself as a soul, and that changes one's whole outlook on everything. We may theoretically understand that we're something different, but it's very difficult for us to do it on a practical level. we still think, our physical and mental components are us. And if they're not, who are we? We don't know. We can't experience that. So it says that when we actually begin to withdraw some of our attention and focus on that, we begin to come to ourselves, and that causes all these powerful transformations where you begin to understand yourself actually as not only eternal, but you're happy. Happiness is an integral part of yourself, and all of these other things, instead of being you, are actually extraneous. And so all of these transformations that were described, the person who in divine consciousness that was described at the end of the second chapter, and also in the third chapter, they're so unusual to our eyes. So when some possibility for happiness comes their way, they're not they're not excited about it. When some reversal happens, they don't even think bad about it. Much less to speak about it and complain. They don't have any desires. Now, who has that? And the reason why it seems so amazing and hard to believe is because we don't have that profound experience of being a soul, of experiencing ourselves as a soul. So the karma yoga leads to this jnana yoga, or more intense realization. And then Krishna talks about early in this chapter, and at the end of chapter 4, he talked about sannyas. And in this case, he meant being free from karmic reactions. And so that happens in a couple of different ways. That was discussed in last chapter when Krishna talked about it's how hard it is to understand what is action and what is inaction. And he gave that verse where he said, the people who can see inaction in action and action in inaction, they really can see. And so it doesn't just mean, it can mean for advanced jnanis, and we're going to talk about them especially at the end of this chapter. We're going to move into the last step of the yoga ladder before bhakti next week in chapter 6. Persons who are really advanced in jnana, they can withdraw their senses from their objects, like the tortoise, that was as it was described in chapter 2. And they can be inactive if they're really, really advanced. And in that case, no bad karmic reactions come to them. They're inactive in an obvious way, an external way, but also in a karmic way. The real important part is the karmic sense. That's what Krishna explained. And so someone who's acting in karma yoga are physically active, but because of their lack of material desire, they don't get karmic reactions. And so Krishna was, and in fact it says all their previous karmic reactions began to be burned up. So this was a definition of sannyas that Krishna was focused upon, the no reactions. You can do it either way. It's harder to do it and be completely inactive. He mentioned in the third chapter that even if you can control your physical senses, your mind usually is wandering after material things. So he says it's very difficult, but the very advanced ones can do it. So it's possible that way. But generally, Krishna was recommending, the karma yoga, because also that's inaction. Even though outwardly there's all kinds of activities going on, karmically and cosmically, not. And that's really what he meant by sannyas, renouncing the material activities. So if one is not sufficiently mature in jnana yoga, it's very difficult to withdraw the senses. Even after withdrawing the senses, there may be lapses in the withdrawal. You have to maintain it. Not only it's hard even to do it in the beginning, and then to maintain it. And so, according to the various commentators, Krishna is recommending karma yoga because it's considered to be a safe and more stable alternative. If you're not quite pure enough, karma yoga will continue to purify you. And if you have some little bumps in the road, you're in Jnana it says then you have to return anyway to karma yoga, and otherwise you have a chance of doing something forbidden. Where karma yoga keeps you more protected. So it's safer and more stable. And so Krishna is recommending that. Now, according to Prabhupada's commentary, where he's focusing on bhakti, he gives some interesting explanations of these verses. So we want to give those here. And he says, the real student of Sankhya philosophy finds the root of the material world, Vishnu, and then in perfect knowledge engages himself in the service of the Lord. That's Bhagavad Gita 5:4 in the purport. So in order to look at this from a bhakti point of view, he gives a more in-depth definition of Sankhya. And there is such a Sankhya, and this means analysis. Krishna, in his analysis in chapter 2, focused really on the soul, the difference between matter and spirit. And he left it at that. But other Sankhyas, they go and they understand that there's something, and also Krishna has taught that sense in Bhagavad Gita after that portion, that there's the root of everything, the source of everything. Brahman, or ultimately it's Vishnu, it's the Supreme Lord. So he says, if somebody takes analytic philosophy out to its final destination, they'll understand that everything comes from the Lord, and then what's the natural inclination then, right? To serve. So he said, therefore then Sankhya leads to bhakti. And that's one of the things that happens when we take up the process of devotional service, is that we understand this fact. This becomes a part of, it's called sambandha, understanding our relationship with God. And so we get a certain understanding of what reality is and our connection with the ultimate reality. And it makes perfect sense to us then to engage in service. Now in 5.5, Prabhupada says, by Sankhya philosophical research, one comes to the conclusion that a living entity is not a part and parcel of the material world, but of the Supreme Spirit whole. Consequently, the spirit soul has nothing to do with the material world. His actions must be in some relation with the Supreme. And then he says, detachment from matter and attachment to Krishna are one and the same. So again, he says that by bhakti, you fulfill that's a situation of renunciation. Because he says everything is done in relation to the Supreme. So it's the same. It's a similar type of detachment as the karma yoga. But in the step that we're trying to do it in bhakti, we're trying to directly please the Lord. So, but in the same way, there's not a selfish motivation or a material motivation, and we're doing our eternal dharma, which is to serve the Lord. And so, in that way, because what Sankhya will do, if you understand that you're a spirit soul and not intrinsically part of the world, you don't have a real connection with that, then of course you said you want to get out of that. That's a natural thing. So Prabhupada is saying through bhakti, that's happening. And then 5.6 he says, therefore, the conclusion is that those who are engaged in Krishna conscious activities are better situated, than the sannyasis engaged in simple speculation about what is Brahman and what is not Brahman, although they too come to Krishna consciousness after many births. So in 5.6, Prabhupada, he just uses, he takes that sannyasa to mean the sannyasa ashram. And so he said that the persons who are just trying to focus on Brahman, they don't have devotion. This is for them, that he's putting that as analogous to the Sankhya type of folks. And so that type of renunciation, he says, is not as stable. Also, just like Krishna says, it's not a very stable thing. And they don't have what they lack really is the higher taste. So he says that it's very difficult to do that. So that the persons who are engaged in Krishna conscious activities are feeling that connection with him, they're feeling this spiritual experience that bolsters them and gives them enthusiasm. Where those who are seeking Brahman, they have a harder time with that. So that's how Prabhupada takes those verses. He takes it that bhakti is superior to any kind. I mean, it covers everything that's done by the best analysis and by any other kind of renunciation. So the perfect knowledge will lead you to the conclusion of bhakti. So if you take bhakti, you've already surpassed that. And if you want to be renounced, you want to renounce material activities, well, you serve Krishna. Those activities are not material. We talked about that in when we talked about the 4th chapter, about the power of sacrifice, where activities done for the Lord actually spiritualize matter. Okay, so that's how Prabhupada takes those verses. And then in 5.7 and then 5.8 and 9, Krishna says, one who works in devotion. And again, this means yukta or yoga yukta in yoga, who is a pure soul and who controls his mind and senses, is dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. Although always working, such a man is never entangled. So we're hearing something about the character and understanding of persons at this advanced stage of karma yoga. And then it says in 5, 8, and 9, a person in the divine consciousness, although engaged in seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, moving about, sleeping, and breathing, always knows within himself that he actually does nothing at all. Because while speaking, evacuating, receiving, or opening or closing his eyes, he always knows that only the material senses are engaged with their objects, and that he is aloof from them. Oops. Okay. So this the practice of the advanced karma yogi is rooted in the transcendental knowledge described in the last chapter, text 435, where he said that once when you come to the platform of transcendental knowledge, that you will understand that everyone is a spirit soul. You and everyone else are a spirit soul in the Supreme. He says that you are in the Supreme, or in other words, you are mind, Krishna says. And so that allows them to see everyone else in a much different way than we do, not having that understanding. As persons without the capacity to experience ourselves as souls, we tend to feel needy. We come under the control of, we heard in the 3rd chapter, kama, desire. We feel that we can improve our situation, that we're lacking things. So when we look at other people, we tend to do one of 3 things. We look at them and think, oh, this person can be my friend or can be of use to me, can help me in some way. They become important to me. This other person, you might look and say, this person could be a competitor, could be against me, could be my enemy. And then you want to try to outmaneuver them or defeat them, or some way you want to try to counteract them. And then third of all, you look and see somebody and they're not relevant in either of those 2 ways. So therefore, we don't worry about them very much. They're neither friends nor foes, they're just peoples, just a guy. And I had my cousin used to work for a minor league baseball team, and so they said that they have so many people on their little minor league baseball teams that only a small number of them really have an opportunity to go into play the high level major league. They're prospects, they call them, but they need so many other people just so they can actually play games. And so there are prospects, and everybody else are just a guy to the professional scouts. So so when we either see somebody who can help us, somebody who can hurt us, and everybody else are just a guy, not important. But when we understand that we're souls and everybody else is a soul, we'll see later on how that gives us such great contentment. And we feel connected. We say we're all within the Supreme. So it says that everyone is that they are dear to everybody, and everyone is dear to them. And it says, the Prabhupada says in the word for word that they have compassion for everybody, as they see that we're all the same kind of thing within the Supreme. And we're going to talk more about that later on too, about how that kind of person sees. But in that way, we feel a connection with others. And because they see themselves and others as spirit souls, who are part of the Supreme, they have compassion for everybody. And because they realize themselves as spirit, their mind and senses are not attracted to material things. This is important. Right now, because we are not happy, not fully satisfied, we're trying to become satisfied. Or either that, or maybe we're actually suffering from something, and we want to get rid of that cause of suffering. But they don't care. Somebody who is realized, who's experienced themselves as soul, these things are not even, they seem completely extraneous. Right now we're monitoring very carefully the status of our sensory input. We're monitoring our speech and our hearing and our smelling and our seeing and our tasting. All these different things we're monitoring very carefully. What's the temperature? What is our comfort level in various different ways? We monitor that very carefully, and it makes a big difference to us. That's how, when we ask somebody, "How are you?" or somebody asks us how we are, we think about those types of things. Oh, it's really hot today, or it's really cold today, or I'm not feeling that well today, or boy, I don't know, my neighbor's playing this terrible music. we think about things like that. Because we're really attuned and monitoring the sensory input. Well, somebody who experiences themselves as a soul, they don't monitor that. Hardly at all. And it doesn't affect them. It's hard for us to understand that because these things they affect us. They make a big difference to us. Mostly because we're attentive to them. It seems, there are some people that do even minor surgeries under hypnosis. And so it doesn't seem that that the actual neural connections are being interrupted. That the pain pathways are still there, but somehow they're not paying attention to them. It's a matter of attention. And we're paying attention to it, and so it really matters. So when somebody experiences themselves as a soul, all this stuff ceases to be important. And to really understand it, we have to do it. But that's what it is. There's a real heavy transformation that takes place when we can experience ourselves as souls. And then on the purport to 5.7, Prabhupada says, one who is on the path of liberation by Krishna consciousness is very dear to every living being, and every living being is dear to him. This is due to his Krishna consciousness. Such a person cannot think of any living being as separate from Krishna. Just as the leaves and branches of a tree are not separate from the tree, he knows very well that by pouring water on the root of the tree, the water will be distributed to all the leaves and branches, or by supplying food to the stomach, the energy is automatically distributed throughout the body. So because the Bhakta is actively serving the Supreme, he sees the service as benefiting others. Remember that transcendental knowledge is that we saw everything. We saw everyone as spirit souls in the Supreme. Or Krishna says, in other words, they're mine. In Bhakti, we're directly interacting with that owner. Krishna who owns everybody, and in whom we are existing. And so the bhakta sees that by serving the Lord, that it's beneficial to everyone. And Prabhupada uses this example from the Bhagavatam, that if you put food into the stomach, the whole rest of the body benefits. If the water enters through the root of the tree, all the parts of it do it. So seeing the Lord as the source of everything, like the root of the tree, if you do some service, then the benefit goes everywhere. And Prabhupada says in the 5.7, and also in the purport, he says that the devotees see themselves as the servant to all. Because the bhakta sees others connected to Krishna, the bhakta becomes the servant to all, as Prabhupada says in the purport. That's why they're compassionate. He says, Prabhupada says they cannot see them separate from Krishna. And so therefore they're important. Those who are dear to someone we love become dear to us. It's as simple as that. So the bhaktas have a more deeply compassionate and powerful connection with other beings. The people on the yoga ladder, they will see them in a spiritual way. They won't analyze them as we usually analyze people, friends, foes, unimportant. They'll see everybody as important, but they won't know exactly how to do things for them. They won't quite as the bhakta can do, because they don't have the same kind of relationship with the Supreme, and because they don't have a love for the Supreme particularly. They don't have as much love for those connected with the Supreme. But still, they will have much compassion. They will have empathy. These kinds of things. Their behavior will be much different than a normal person. But Prabhupada says the bhaktas take it even to another level. So let's look at 5:10 through 5:12. These are kind of a little section unto themselves. One who performs his duty without attachment, surrendering the results unto the Supreme Lord, is unaffected by sinful action, as the lotus leaf is untouched by water. So there's this little poetic image here. I don't know if you've seen a lotus. It has the type of surface that causes the water to simply bead up. It completely beads up. It has no, I think chemically you say that it has no adhesion. So the cohesion of the water molecules form like a perfect little sphere, and there's no adhesion, or usually, like you see, if you have water in a glass, it'll rise up a little bit on the sides around the glass because it's adhering to the glass. So it rises above the point in the middle. So the lotus leaf, the water cannot adhere to it. So the power of cohesion keeps it in like a little ball, and it just slides right off, rolls right off. And doesn't at all keep it moist. There's no residue. It's completely dry. So it says someone who so this karma yoga, performing duty without attachment. Of course, bhakti is doing the same thing, surrendering the results unto the Supreme Lord. The word here is brahmani, and Prabhupada says this means, and also other commentaries like Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, this refers to the Lord. There's another commentator, Baladev Vidyabhushan, who also says that this Brahmani can be thinking that all of the other material things, all the material things that are not the soul, are coming from the Supreme. We had that notion previously when we talked about sacrifice, where we saw all the implements of sacrifice, the thing that was offered in sacrifice, the offering itself, all these things were coming from the Supreme, coming from the Brahman. So this is, he says that the persons who are performing the devotion or karma yoga are seeing everything also. They're seeing themselves as spirits. They're understanding the presence of the Lord, and because Krishna mentioned already about that, but they're also seeing that the things that they're using in service and in their duty, and the things that surround them, are also products of the Supreme. And that'll be a little bit important later on. There's going to be a section that really makes that clear. Then 5:11 says, the yogis, abandoning attachment, act with body, mind, intelligence, and even with the senses, only for the purpose of purification. And 5:12, the steadily devoted soul attains unadulterated peace because he offers the result of all activities to me, whereas a person who is not in union with the divine, the yukta is the Sanskrit word, which can also mean somebody who's practicing this karma yoga, who is greedy for the fruits of his labor, becomes entangled. So they're making a contrast here between those who act with a material end in mind and those who are not. And so on the outwardly they may look like they're doing the same thing. People on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, Krishna and those on the other side were seemingly acting in the same way. But one of them was untouched by the sinful action, while the others were not, or were touched. And it says that these yogis, they don't act for any selfish purpose. They only do it for trying to become liberated, trying to become purified. And it says then that the person who is very steady in that, they become very peaceful. Whereas somebody who's not, they get entangled. This is a badyate. They're bound up. They are continuing through the cycle of karma. And because they're not realizing themselves as a soul, they're experiencing the fluctuations of life. Okay. So the Lord mentions this also in the Gita. Maisa in 330, Prabhupada says this, he quotes this in the purport in 510. The Lord also says in the Gita 330, Mai sarvani karmani sanyasya, resign all works unto me. So this is he's bringing this up again. And then in the purport to 511, he says, when he applies everything produced of the body, mind, intelligence, words, life, wealth, etc., wherever he may have within his possession to Krishna's service, he is at once dovetailed with Krishna. He is one with Krishna and is devoid of the false ego that leads one to believe that he is the body, etc. And the Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur indicates that the karma yogi is acting for the purification of the mind in particular. And this is important from the yoga ladder point of view. Because we'll see in the next chapter that's one of the last things that are purified, is the mind. And then Prabhupada says in the purport to 512, this is the secret of Krishna consciousness. Realization that there is no existence besides Krishna is the platform of peace and fearlessness. Now, this is a beautiful statement of bhakti. That there is no existence besides Krishna. In the Bhagavatam, there's a verse that Prabhupada likes to quote that says that fear comes from an understanding that there is something, an existence besides Krishna. Where if everything is part of Krishna's existence, and we're going to find out at the end of the chapter that Krishna is the well-wisher of everyone, then where is our fear? So fear is only when there's a thought that there's something independent besides Krishna. He says the bhaktas, they feel peaceful that way because they have that confidence in Krishna. Prabhupada here is talking about being free from the false ego, because this is also an important part of how they're dealing with it. What's that? The attitude with which they're performing their karma yoga is important. That they do not think, they make this very clear distinction between themselves and the body and the mind. They see this clear distinction. So I think we're going to see that. So in 513, the Krishna says, when the embodied living being controls his nature and mentally renounces all actions, he resides happily in the city of 9 gates, which is the material body. A little poetic way of doing it. There's the 9 openings of the body, neither working nor causing work to be done. And then 514, the embodied spirit, master of the city of his body, does not create activities, nor does he induce people to act, nor does he create the fruits of action. All this is enacted by the modes of material nature. And 15, nor does the Supreme Lord assume anyone's sinful or pious activities. Embodied beings, however, are bewildered because of the ignorance which covers their real knowledge. So let's take a look at these a little bit.
Assume meaning, Brahma? Does Supreme Lord assume anyone's?
So we'll talk about that. So Prabhupada says, let me see. He says that it is ignorance acquired from time immemorial that is the cause of bodily suffering and distress. As soon as a living entity becomes aloof from the activities of the body, he becomes free from the reactions as well. And then the concept of the soul not being the doer has been brought up in chapter 2:19. That's where Krishna said that the soul neither kills or is killed. He was trying to make Arjuna a little bit more confident that actually it's only bodies killing bodies. And then in chapter 3:27, it says, because of false ego, we think that we're doing things. And this makes us very foolish. Vimudatma. It says, kartam iti manyate. The false ego, ahankara, vimudatma, makes us very foolish. And therefore we think we're doing things. And so the people that are doing this karma yoga, and bhaktas as well, who understand that we are eternal spirits, then if we realize the distinction between spirit and matter, we realize that we're not the body or not the mind, that we're not intrinsically connected with the outside world, then we realize what's really going on. That the soul may desire, but the actual activity is being done by higher powers and other powers, by the devatas, the demigods, or just sometimes just says by material nature. Right? Things are happening out here. Matter is working, and so all that happens is our body reacts to our desires. And for the verse that says that the Lord doesn't accept or assume any of our sinful reactions, he's saying that the Lord isn't responsible either for our good activities or our bad activities, even though he's the supreme controller. And Prabhupada explains it this way. In 5:15 in his purport, he says, the Lord is the constant companion of the living entity as Paramatma or the super soul, and therefore he can understand the desires of the individual soul as one can smell the flavor or the aroma of a flower by being near it. Desire is a subtle form of conditioning for the living entity. The Lord fulfills his desire as he deserves. Man proposes and God disposes. And so Krishna also told Arjuna that he had the right to do his duty, but he didn't deserve to get the results of the activity. That's because we cannot do things completely on our own. The soul cannot move the body, but the body responds to our desires. They're trying to make that, they're trying to give like little neural interfaces and stuff. Eventually you'll have, especially things like fighter aircraft that will respond. They actually they have right now even, some people have prosthetic limbs that they can move with their thoughts. They have them. They're not very widely available, but there are people that can do that they can learn how to move them with their mind. Because there's a little neural interface there. And so it's possible to do that. So there's a more sophisticated one between our soul and our body that allows the body to respond to our desires, but without the help from whatever makes the world go round. And we think it's the devatas and ultimately the Lord. It wouldn't happen if your airplane breaks down, or your limb has a malfunction, it doesn't have a power source, you can be thinking all you want and nothing's going to happen. And so both of those things are external to you, and as long as they're set up properly, they can respond to your desires and act, but they're doing that on their own, under their own power. You're simply controlling that. And so in the same way, it says that we have desires. We have free will. And so Krishna, Prabhupada in many places says, being our dear friend, he fulfills them, and he says here, as we deserve. So we wonder, well, I have desires that are not fulfilled, but we may not have the karma appropriate to that. But Krishna will guide us towards the things we desire, and according to our qualification. Of course, if we do things that are going to bring up a negative reaction, we have to do that. We're the ones who have to accept the responsibility. You chose to do this. These are the consequences. You chose to do this, which was good. This is the amount that you deserve. You get that. So the person in knowledge understands that even when we do something we have a great idea, or we can do something physically, that we can't do that without cooperation from higher powers. And so therefore we do not deserve the full credit. We only can say we had some desire to do that. And so these people are thinking in terms of that. They're thinking of how they're separate. They're thinking of how the actions that they do perform are using material that's coming ultimately from the Supreme, from Pradhan, it says, the material nature. And it's functioning because of higher powers. So that automatically reduces our possessiveness. It reduces our pride and taking credit for things. It makes us less attached. So this is one thing. This is part of what's being brought in, part of the Sankhya that's being brought into their practice. So they have this understanding that they're souls and other people are souls, so their interaction with people is quite different. And they realize that even when they do things, they're just expressing some desire, and the actual motions take place with the cooperation of other powers. Okay, now 5:16. When, however, one is enlightened with the knowledge by which nescience is destroyed, then his knowledge reveals everything as the sun lights up everything in the daytime. Nice image. So we can see then all the important things. We can see things as they are. We're thinking now that basically we generally think that somehow the world is here, and somehow we are here. And we are what we see when we look in the mirror, and what comes to our mind when we close our eyes. and that we're here, it's here. It's our business to get whatever we can out of it. Whereas it says somebody who really sees things clearly sees that there's first of all themselves as a soul, which is separate from the rest of the world and eternal. The world around us is something that's outside of us and controlled and owned and created by others, namely the Lord. And so their viewpoint is complete, and it makes perfect sense. It says that when somebody begins to experience themselves as a soul, they begin to have a really strong inclination that somebody else is there. They can feel the presence of God as the Paramatma. It begins to happen. We're going to talk about the Paramatma somewhat in this chapter, how they begin to perceive the Paramatma. That's why they see everyone equally. Right now we can't even perceive ourselves. We're so distracted that we don't even understand ourselves. We're not experiencing even ourselves. We're so caught up in this world around us, the sensory input and such, the mental input. But when we do, then we realize, wow, I'm not even alone. There's somebody else there. And we're going to focus on that so much more in the next chapter. When one's intelligence, mind, faith, and refuge are all fixed in the Supreme, see, this is beautiful, then one becomes fully cleansed of misgivings through complete knowledge and thus proceeds straight on the path of liberation. And then the very famous verse, 18, is the humble sages, by virtue of true knowledge, see with equal vision a learned and gentle Brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog-eater. And in 519, those whose minds are established in sameness and equanimity have already conquered the conditions of birth and death. They are flawless like Brahman, and they are already situated in Brahman. This is really reminiscent of that verse on sacrifice. If you see things in that way, yourself as a spirit, others as spirits, the Lord who is, or in Him, or belong to Him, and that His energy is producing everything else. And then you become transcendent. Because even it's like I said, there's that mentality where you see everything in the spiritual sense, causes it to act in a spiritual way. So here it says that we, after offering everything to our actions to the Lord, have becoming more conscious of Him. It says then they begin to meditate, because they understand these connections. The material energy, which is not us, is the Lord's energy, still coming ultimately from the Lord. We, as spirits, are owned by the Lord. Others, who are spirits, are also owned by the Lord and in the Lord. So we begin to see the Lord all everywhere. Right? Transcendence everywhere. So it says then the intelligence, mind, faith, and refuge are all fixed in the Supreme. That's how their way of living changes. It says one becomes fully cleansed of misgivings. Like the Prophet already talked before, if we see that there's no separate existence from Krishna, then there's no worries. So when the sun comes up in the daytime and we can see things clearly like that, and then we're focused in all these different ways on the Supreme. And it says the humble sages, they see all these different bodies, embodied spirits, equally because they see also that they're all souls, just like it said in the in fourth chapter, but also that the super soul is present in each and every one of them. The Lord is present within them. And then in 519, that they're in that case, this is they're already, when they're seeing in that spiritual way, Already they're transcending this world. They're already connecting in the spiritual energy. So let's take a look at these couple of things here. So those on the yoga ladder begin to have an understanding of supersoul by virtue of their realization of the soul. Like I said, when we right now we're spiritual beings, and all we can perceive of ourselves is that we're a conscious experiencer. But we're not experiencing much of ourselves. We're just experiencing everything external to us, because that's where we're focusing our attention. And so we make that, kind of a crude example, but somebody who's really involved in a movie or a video game or something, they can be oblivious to somebody else in the room. They can forget who they are. Right? So we have a word for that. We say we lose ourselves in something. We actually have a terminology for that. We lose ourselves in some activity. We're so preoccupied. We can be on the edge of our seats watching a movie and forget, who we are, why we're there, what we have to do next. We're just, and so in this case, in the kind of reality that we have, where we have the senses and the mind and a persistent reality that's, it's not on a screen, it's three-dimensional. You don't have to use you don't apparently use any equipment. We're actually wearing some very sophisticated equipment. Our bodies and mind are very sophisticated, but it seems like we don't even have any equipment on. Right? If you do the virtual reality thing, you have to have like put these things over your head and sensors and kind of stuff like that. Even if you do the Matrix thing, if you could do that, they had to plug something in the back of your brain, some probe interface with your brain and the computer. For us, it doesn't look like we have any equipment. And we're here. And so we forget ourselves, and we can, of course, what to speak of anybody else who might be in the same room. And so when we begin to awaken, we break our fixation on the external reality. Then we realize, oh, I'm here, and then the next thing we begin to realize that there's somebody else is here. And that's the super soul that accompanies every soul. So Prabhupada says in his purport, as far as the bodies are concerned, in different castes or different species of life, the Lord is equally kind to everyone because he treats every living being as a friend and yet maintains himself as Paramatma regardless of the circumstances of the living entities. The Lord as Paramatma is present both in the outcast and in the Brahmana, although the body of a Brahmana and that of an outcast are not the same. So everybody realizes that we have had many different forms, and yet we are here. And so the same kind of entity is in all the different living beings. It's only a temporary circumstance that they may be higher or lower. And the Lord's friendship with them, he says, treats every living being as a friend, is there at all times. So they become very dear. Okay, so let's look. We're running a little short of time today. I do want to finish the chapter if we possibly can. I have a little time, I guess. So 520 through 522. So this is what's happening when people are attaining, first of all, detachment and knowledge of themselves as a soul. Then it starts to branch out. They understand the super soul. They start to see everybody differently. They start to understand fully how they're separate from their physical and mental actions, and it changes their whole. It's a revolutionary change in their understanding and consciousness, and it just changed their whole world. 520. A person who neither rejoices upon achieving something pleasant, nor laments upon obtaining something unpleasant, who is self-intelligent, who is unbewildered, and who knows the science of God, is already situated in transcendence. So in the very beginning, Krishna in chapter 2, twice in chapter 2, he was mentioning liberation in 2:15, and at the very end, he said that if somebody is in this divine consciousness, they'll attain Brahma Nirvanam. And he repeats that here. That somebody who's able to do this, to really come to their really understanding themselves as a soul experientially, and especially then be able to begin to perceive that there's a super soul as well, and understand how we're parts of God's creation, and how everything that exists comes from the same supreme source. That's liberation. Person's going to end you're going to end your material life. There's going to be Amrit, as he said first, or Brahma Nirvanam. And so Krishna is saying here very clearly that people who have gone through this practice, they've had Sankhya Yoga, Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and come to this very high level. They've achieved this transcendental knowledge, that's Jnana, that their material life is over, that they're on the platform of liberation. That's what he keeps saying. And he says, such a liberated person, and this is, if you notice in here, it says, neither rejoices upon achieving something pleasant or laments upon obtaining something unpleasant. This should give you some echoing of text 256, where Arjuna was asking, this person in divine consciousness, how do they speak? And what it meant was like, what happens when something wonderful happens, or what happens when something bad happens? And it says, if you ask them, they'll say, it's only my karma. It's not important if it's good or bad. I either deserve to have this, or somehow it's my good karma coming through. They don't complain. And if it's something wonderful, they're not excited. It's just my karma. It has nothing. They don't feel like it has anything intrinsically to do with themselves. So they don't even think something in their mind. Right? If something bad happens to us, we go, oh! Even if we don't do it out loud, we do it in our mind. Oh, that's terrible. They don't think anything. And if something wonderful happens, we get, say we're in a meeting and we get this text that something great happened. We can't say yay, but we inside our mind we go, oh, that's great. They don't think anything like that. So this is echoing that from there, so we can see we're talking about the same level of understanding. And then 521, such a liberated person is not attracted to material sense pleasure, but is always in trance. This is interesting, enjoying the pleasure within. In this way, the self-realized person enjoys unlimited happiness, for he concentrates on the Supreme. And remember, in the second chapter, we had the verse about the higher taste. That it's very difficult to control the mind and the senses. But if one can do so, if one has this higher spiritual experience, param drishtva, the experience of the Supreme is literally what it translates to be. Because people say that people have a taste for things, and that taste remains even when they're restricted. So that someone may you have a medical condition, and so you have a special diet, so you're restricted from things. So you may control that, but the taste for them remains. You can't wait until it's over, and you can eat what you want to do, eat what you want to eat. But he says somebody who has this param drishtva, so Prabhupada extends it, says they have a higher taste. They experience something better that causes them to lose their attraction for Prabhupada says, pale dead things. Is how he uses it in his purport there. So here he says they're not attracted to material sense pleasure because they're always in trance, enjoying the pleasure within. In this way, the self-realized person enjoys unlimited happiness, for he concentrates on the Supreme. So there's both things. So you're getting this self-satisfaction that is our nature as a soul, and we're also having some connection with the Supreme. Like that, even these persons are beginning to understand super soul and understand that there is a Supreme that's in charge of everything, in control of everything. Even if they're thinking it's more, the Jnanis may be thinking more in terms of the Brahman, but even so, that gives them some happiness. And then an intelligent person, this is 522, does not take part in the sources of misery, which are due to contact with the material senses. O son of Kunti, such pleasures have a beginning and an end, and so the wise man does not delight in them. So here it says that it's interesting how it's put, does not take part in the sources of misery. We say, well, we don't do that either. Do we seek misery? But you're due to contact with the material senses. Right? So this reminds us of text 2:14, Matra Sparshas tu Konteya Shatosh, where it says, he told Arjuna that there's always this ongoing cycle of happiness and distress, pleasant and unpleasant sensations. Matra Sparshas means when the senses contact their objects, which are the sensations. So we're constantly subjected to a variety of different types of sensations. Some of them are pleasant, and some of them are not. And so he told Arjuna that you're facing something that's very unpleasant. You have to learn how to tolerate them. That's what he told him. And then he said, when they become the same to you, sama dukkha sukham dhiram, when you become you don't have to, it's not even toleration anymore. That level you're liberated, he says. So he's talking, what he didn't describe is what that would take to become that. And now we know. There has to be that soul realization. So here it says, but that inevitably, the sensations are going to be causes of misery. That's really what Krishna is saying here. Inevitably, we're thinking that some of them are pleasant, some of them are unpleasant, right? And so we're trying to maximize the pleasant, minimize the unpleasant. But Krishna is saying, no, they're all sources of misery. Why? Because they're temporary. So even if you have some pleasure, you feel even worse when it's gone. You feel the lacking of it. You can't keep it. Even if you whatever you have, because it's temporary, then you have to face the misery of having it removed. How long do you want to have the happiness? Forever. Ask anybody, right? How long would you like to have this pleasure? Forever. But you can't. And that causes the misery. So it can be miserable up front, or it can be miserable later on because it's temporary. So Krishna just says, these sensations, it's a losing game. If you want to try to build your life, build your happiness on the sensations, it's a rigged game. You're going to lose. The odds are completely against you. We're almost finished what we're doing. And so it just isn't going to happen for you. Okay? And Prabhupada says in the purport to 522, he says, material sense pleasures are due to the contact of the material senses, which are all temporary because the body itself is temporary. A liberated soul is not interested in anything which is temporary. I said, he knows he's internal. Knowing well the joys of transcendental pleasures, how can a liberated soul agree to enjoy false pleasure? So again, he's talking heavily to the higher taste. So this is how we make advancement, whether it be, because we said already before, the yoga ladder itself is not something we can take up. How we make advancement in our devotional life is we have to be able to feel and experience what Prabhupada calls the higher taste, or the direct experience of the Supreme, meaning ourselves as souls, super soul, the presence of Krishna through his energies. We have to be able to feel that different type of happiness that's coming from deep in our own existence, rather than in the sensations. Otherwise, it's very hard to control ourselves. Most people want to have both devotion and pleasant sensations. They don't realize that the two things are completely antithetical. The only way we can come to the point, of course we think, wow, God, how can I live? How can I live if I don't have, the happiness, material happiness? But how you can do it is, we're hearing about it here. That it's possible to come to the point where you are so happy through the realization of yourself as spirit, through the presence of Krishna as a super soul, through the presence of Krishna as God, through his the material energy being his energy. So we can meditate all these different ways on God. That this doesn't matter at all. Just like he said in 2:15, sama dukkha sukham dhiram. You'll be unchanged, unaffected by happiness or distress. It's possible. It's possible, but we have to go deeper in our practice and try to nourish that. Okay, so let's go on to, now we're getting close to the end here. 523 through 526. And then after this we get a little preview of the next chapter. The last three texts are a preview of the chapter 6. Before giving up this present body, if one is able to tolerate the urges of the material senses and check the force of desire and anger, he is well situated and is happy in this world. Remember, notice here it's interesting. It says, check the force of desire and anger. But also it says, tolerate the urges of the material senses. And Prabhupada gives actually in his purport, he quotes something very familiar for us if we went through the Nectar of Instruction portion of the course. Prabhupada says, if one wants to make steady progress on the path of self-realization, he must try to control the forces of the material senses. These are the forces of talk, forces of anger, forces of mind, forces of the stomach, forces of the genitals, and forces of the tongue. One who is able to control the forces of all these different senses and the mind is called Goswami or Swami. The word Vegam was used in there. So we had all the Vegams in the first verse of the Nectar of Instruction. But so what really happened is that what really is talked about here, though, in the verse, it just says desire and anger. If you look at the Sanskrit, but what's happening is that we know that there's different sitting places of kama, the desire, and that's in the senses, in the mind. so they cause the desires and the anger are causing disturbances in all the other senses. So that's why Prabhupada brings those other ones up. It's assumed that if you have kama and krodha, desire and anger, that it's going to manifest itself in these different ways. So that's why that verse is so relevant. That's why he brings it up. That's why he even translates it that way. Urges of the material senses. Then 524, one whose happiness is within, who is active and rejoices within, and whose aim is inward, is actually the perfect mystic. He is liberated in the Supreme, and ultimately he attains the Supreme. And this is 25, those who are beyond the dualities that arise from doubts, whose minds are engaged within, who are always busy working for the welfare of all living beings, and who are free from all sins, achieve liberation in the Supreme. And 526, those who are free from anger and all material desires, who are self-realized, self-disciplined, and constantly endeavoring for perfection, are assured of liberation in the Supreme in the very near future. So, when it talks, of course, about within, everything being within, then Prabhupada says, unless one is able to relish happiness from within, how can one retire from the external engagements meant for deriving superficial happiness? That's from 524. And we heard about how to get rid of this desire and anger in text 20 in chapter 3. That one of the main ways that happens is that we understand ourselves to be a soul. It's the only way to do it. So that's why you see it comes up again. That's what stopped us from acting appropriately. That's what this feel that we need something thing which is so fundamental to our existence, goes away when we can understand ourselves as a soul. So within, of course, doesn't mean we don't want to fall into Arjuna's trap and say that means we can't do anything physically. Krishna's been saying the whole time that when we understand ourselves as a spiritual being, when we understand that we're connected with God and all these different things, that then we can act in a way that will be free from reaction. It'll act in a way that's not selfish, that's not desiring something material. So without attachment and aversion, in chapter 2 it says right away that they can withdraw their senses like the tortoise, but they can also act without attachment and aversion. So we realize that the body and the mind do not act independently, but follow our desire. So it can then, if we desire to do some service, or we desire to, for Arjuna doing the karma yoga, he can follow his dharma, and it doesn't count for anything negative. It doesn't make them attached to it. It doesn't make them. In fact, it makes them increases their level of knowledge, because they're not. When we're acting, we're looking for the result. We're looking for some kind of, short-term or long-term. Ultimately, it'll be a sensation of some kind that's going to happen. We're thinking that we've done something important. I've done it. I've deserved this. So, and so that makes us identify more and more with our bodies and minds. I thought of this. We think like that. But when the person is more self-realized, then they can also use the body and mind in service or in the performance of their duty, and they won't have some kind of, it won't produce ego, it won't produce pride, it won't produce desire. And so they're quite free to act. And that's why you see the devotees are acting. Prabhupada said, when he was printing his Srimad Bhagavatam in India, he was doing the same things that so many other people working in publishing were doing. He says, but I was doing it for Krishna. So his understanding was different, his purpose was different. And so it was different. It wasn't producing reaction. Okay. Prabhupada says in 525 in his purport, the sufferings of humanity are due to forgetfulness of Krishna as the supreme enjoyer, the supreme proprietor, and the supreme friend. Therefore, to act to revive this consciousness within the entire human society is the highest welfare work. Oh, so that's interesting. Prabhupada is he's foreshadowing the last verse of the chapter here. Yeah. And then, but this is from 525, I believe. And then he says, and then 525 he says, similarly, the devotee in Krishna consciousness, although far away from the Lord's abode, can elevate himself to that abode simply by thinking of him constantly, by engagement in Krishna consciousness. He's talking about how you can, how these people will become liberated soon. So he's talking about this liberation there. Okay, so now we'll take a quick look at the final 3 verses, and these foreshadow, give you a little taste of what's to come. Because now we went through Sankhya Yoga, Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and then there's Ashtanga Yoga or Dhyana, meditational yoga. That's the next step. So Krishna, even in this one, says somebody who has knowledge, they should continue to act with Karma Yoga because it's a more stable situation. But somebody who's super, super mature in this jnana, and they're beginning to understand the presence of the super soul, they can give up, as we'll see, their external actions and perform deep meditation with a notion to encounter face-to-face the super soul. So their understanding right now of super soul is only, they feel it more. It's a little more theoretical yet. But there's a way then, when you can withdraw your senses from external things, then now there's something you can do with them. It's not just that withholding the senses from their objects is an end in itself, but there's a purpose to it. So here it says, in 527 and 28, shutting out all external sense objects, it's withdrawing them, keeping the eyes and vision concentrated between the two eyebrows, suspending the inward and outward breaths within the nostrils, and thus controlling the mind, senses, and intelligence, the transcendentalist aiming at liberation becomes free from desire, fear, and anger. One who is always in this state is certainly liberated. And when they attain that, when their practices mature, they will attain an understanding which is described in 529. Prabhupada calls this the peace formula. We can also understand it. A person in full consciousness of me, knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities, the supreme lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, attains peace from the pangs of material miseries. So Prabhupada says in the purport to 2728, he says, after explaining the above principles of liberation in the Supreme, the Lord gives instruction to Arjuna as to how one can come to that position by the practice of mysticism or yoga known as Ashtanga Yoga, which is divisible into an eightfold procedure called the yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. In the 6th chapter, the subject of yoga is explicitly detailed, and at the end of the 5th, it is only preliminarily explained. Okay, so there's a transition going on. There's that one last step, and actually, Vishnu Chakrabarti Thakur says this is the beginning of bhakti, because we're dealing with now the personal form of God. A little bit of bhakti is awakening here that makes them want to search the super soul. But more technically, it's just the highest rung on the ladder pre the bhakti. It makes a very smooth transition. If somebody can do this, which we can't do today, but if somebody could, and we'll see it as we find out at the end of the chapter 6, it's very easy then to take the next step to full-fledged bhakti. It's very easy. So it's at the top rung of the yoga ladder. And so what's happening is that when one can really, because Arjuna was saying, if your heart's not really pure, and you prematurely try to stop all of your activities, oh man, the mind's going to get a hold of you. Something's going to happen. You can't keep it. You can't stay focused. So he's telling Arjuna before you keep doing your activities with the right consciousness. But at some point, if one's transcendental knowledge is awakened really strongly, and one's really mature in this karma yoga that has transitioned to jnana yoga, and it's really mature, really powerful, then there's a next step that they can take. So even that jnana yoga will make them liberated, at least into Brahman. But then there's another step they can take. They're qualified then to focus their attention away from everything else. So this is the thing, we can't even imagine trying to do that. Right? Try it. Just try not to see, hear, taste, touch, or smell, even for a second, and then don't think anything. Okay, first just try any of the ones. You can't. And you can't. You just can't. And our attention is so caught up on it, we can't. That's why it's so hard to understand how the world changes when we can experience ourselves as a soul. So, but they can do that, and they pull. They do these things. They do there's things they avoid, positive things they do. Then when they're more mature, then they begin to sit, asana, control the breath, then pratyahara, and then they begin to withdraw the senses, dharana. Means to really powerfully withdraw the consciousness from all the senses. And then you can focus on something else, that's dhyana, on the super soul. As I said, the super soul is standing right with us. Just like we're absorbed in a video game, and the super soul is standing behind us. They can pull their attention away from the video game and then begin to turn their attention towards the super soul who's there in the room. They can swivel their little chair around and see. And that's what's going to happen in the next chapter. So we're transitioning from that. We're getting to the last of the of the yoga ladder before bhakti. And that's what's going to happen next time. We're going to talk about this. And Prabhupada says about the 529, because it's a verse he quotes a lot. The conditioned souls within the clutches of the illusory energy are all anxious to attain peace in the material world, but they do not know the formula for peace, which is explained in this part of the Bhagavad Gita. The greatest peace formula is simply this: Lord Krishna is the beneficiary in all human activities. Men should offer everything to the transcendental service of the Lord because he is the proprietor of all planets and the demigods thereon. No one is greater than he. So just Prabhupada calls that the peace formula. He said that was complete preaching. If you just understand that, that'll take you to bhakti. So you can see how here they're technically, according to the yoga ladder, these people are thinking of Paramatma when they're thinking of this. And so, but you can see how easy that would be to transition to bhakti once you have that personal understanding. You understand the super soul is simply a manifestation of Bhagavan, which Krishna will bring up in the 7th chapter. It'll be very easy. So we can't, and we'll see what we have to do. Let me see. So we can't follow the yoga ladder system, but there's aspects of each part that are relevant to our experience in bhakti. So we will have to be able to focus our attention to go deeper into bhakti, just like they do. So much that we talked about controlling the mind in the next chapter. That's so difficult to do. So Prabhupada he applies many of the verses to bhakti because they're still important. But what's really happening there, we can't do that. We can't withdraw our senses from everything. But there'll be bhakti applications there, and we can understand a little bit about our path in bhakti from what happens there in this dhyana yoga or ashtanga yoga, as it's called in different places. So we'll pick up with chapter 6 next time, and go through that last rung on the yoga ladder, and then when we pass through chapter 6, we hit the section of just full-fledged bhakti. Krishna lays it all out for us. So it'll be right in our element at that time. So thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Sometimes, maybe I will ask this question. The practical implementation of 5.29 is Bhaktaram Ekadarsam.
Uh-huh.
So literally means like to implement in our lives. Is it a good way to implement whatever we see? Everything we think, oh, this belongs to Krishna, this belongs to Krishna. Whereas if I see any other person, oh, he's a spirit soul, Krishna loves him. So every time thinking like that for some period of time, that helps to actually implement this in our life.
And remember even more importantly, right? Suhridam sarvadehinam. See, because there's one thing to understand, that Krishna is supreme and all-powerful and the controller and the source of everything. Well, to our material minds, that's a frightening prospect. Right? There could be a cosmic tyrant.
Yeah.
Right? Having people have too much power is oftentimes not very pleasant. He owns everything. He controls everything. He's the goal of everything. What if he's a bad guy? Right? Yes. Then we're really in trouble. And but he's not. He's Suhridam. So Suhridam is a special kind of friend. I think it's there's friends on the equal level. Like I think those are called mitras. But the Suhridam is like somebody who's in a superior position, who's kind of like a benefactor, or someone who mentors you. Like someone from a superior, who's compassionate and merciful in that way. So like Krishna is, he's clearly above us, but he wants to help us. So he's that kind of a friend, a well-wishing friend, a little patron or a mentor or a helper. And so when we know that, Because we oftentimes want to have friends in high places. We have a friend in the highest place, and then that he and the fact that he owns everything and controls everything, that makes us more secure. You see, because if we may have a friend in the high place, but maybe they can't do everything.
Right.
We know somebody in whatever somewhere in government, but they can only handle their department, or if there's somebody above them, they can't do much. So, but there's no department other than Krishna, and there's no one above him. And so if he is the controller and owner and everything of everything, and he's our well-wisher, wow, that's really fortunate. So that means we can really relax about our existence and our life, because we have somebody on our side who wants the best for us and who has the capacity to do it. So now we just have to interact with him. Now it's just up to, he's already there. He already has that desire to help us, and now it's just a question of us interacting with him. Now let's do our part of it. Let's show some gratitude. All right?
So, so it would be practical, like if I think in my daily aspects of life, if either something good happens or if something bad happens, Krishna is the supreme controller, but still he is not giving this to me, so there must be some reason. So, because trusting him as a good friend. So in every daily aspect, thinking like that, is it a good approach?
Well, you think that what's ever coming to you is because of your desire, and you're getting what you deserve. Right? Prabhupada talked about that earlier,
Yes.
in the purport, where he mentioned that he reacts to our desire and gives us to what we deserve. So are we desiring Krishna, or are we desiring other things most of the time? You see? And otherwise also, Krishna may send you things. This is two things. Okay, you can say, well, how come there's misery? Okay, sometimes it's because we're not desiring Krishna so much, and so then Krishna gives what we deserve. Even if we're desiring Krishna, okay, then Krishna sends us things that may be seemingly unpleasant, but they are opportunities to learn and to surrender more deeply. Because oftentimes what we do is we think that if Krishna is our friend, I may not be worshipping Krishna for the purpose of getting something material. But I'm thinking, because Krishna is my friend, he's going to kind of help me out.
Right.
Bad things aren't going to happen. At least he's going to cover some real bad stuff. Okay? What happens if he doesn't? Are we going to say, okay, Krishna, I don't think you're the kind of friend I want? Or are we going to keep worshipping? See, that's a chance to see how deep your faith is. So whatever happens to us is a chance to confront the very different attachments and doubts and inhibitions we have for serving Krishna. So he may give us something that outwardly seems distasteful, but we can find the sweet inner meaning of it if we and how it can deepen our surrender, deepen our relationship, deepen our confidence in Krishna, and take it to a deeper level. Now we're thinking, oh, Krishna will just help me out in my material life.
Yes.
Now what's the use of that? We just went through. It's not useful. It's only a course of misery. Right? So we should get rid of that, and say that it says, right, the person who's they just consider whatever's happening to me is the result of my past karma. Krishna has reduced it, and so that person who surrenders, who offers obeisances to Krishna in the core of their hearts while suffering whatever comes, that person becomes so dear to Krishna. So we get tested because our commitment, our understanding, our dedication is limited. And Krishna is trying to take it one step at a time from limited to unlimited. That's what he's doing. So there's a lesson in everything that comes. So if we want Krishna, we can see a lesson in everything that comes.
Okay.
We can see how we can either use that in our service, how we can recognize something about ourselves that we need to overcome. Oh, I have this doubt. I didn't realize I had that doubt. I didn't realize I had that desire. You see, I didn't realize that I was wanting Krishna just to help me out materially. As it stays under the level of our. We're not thinking of it all the time.
Oh, okay. So, okay, I could realize, I have this kind of desire. To
Yeah.
know that Krishna putting us in a certain situation helps.
Yeah.
So that's what you're telling, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even things that seem unpleasant are opportunities for growth.
Yes.
We have to see that. It might be revealing something about ourselves that we weren't aware of. You know, it might be giving us an opportunity to upgrade our level of surrender and devotion.
Yeah.
You know, it's an opportunity for growth. Krishna arranges it perfectly that way. So it may be seemingly pleasant or seemingly unpleasant.